Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations, episode number 78. I'm your host, Joe Hannon. Now, as I was prepping for this episode with my customary beverage here, it occurred to me that for the few of you who watch this podcast on YouTube, you might think I'm over here ripping beers at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. But no, I generally like to record with a Kirkland brand seltzer. My wife and I are really partial to the grapefruit flavor of the sample pack that you get. So those tend to go first. This is the last cold one in the fridge, so might hear some consternation later from her about that. We'll see. How far out are we from Worlds now? We're less than a week out. I fly out. No, we're a little more than a week out. I fly out on Wednesday, so by the time this episode releases, we'll be 1 week out. I feel, knock on wood here, really healthy. We had our weekly comp class on Sunday morning this week, and I just felt great. Everything was firing. Everything was happening like I wanted it to happen. I wasn't thinking much. I was just kind of doing. So that was a bit of wind in my sails. We'll see how that continues tonight in practice. I did my HIIT workout earlier today in the afternoon, and I definitely am in the fighting zone. There were a lot of obscenities being hurled, a lot of yelling. My home gym is in my basement. It's a pretty Spartan affair. It's kind of like a Russian prison weight room, but it gets the job done. And in my basement, we have these low-level, foundation-level windows where I can sort of see out toward the street. And I was hurling a lot of obscenities, and I watched this woman out of the corner of my eye walking her dog, and she must have heard me because she crossed the street. I don't recognize her. I don't think she lives on my block, so I guess I won't be seeing her anymore walking down my street anymore. But my dear friend Pat asked me how I was doing last night, and I said to her, maybe for the first time ever, I am actually looking forward to a competition. I feel as prepared as I'm ever going to be. My jiu-jitsu has never felt better. My conditioning has never felt better, which is really saying something since I was dog sick not that long ago. And my psychology has just never been better. I think I was thinking a lot about where I was at a year ago going into this and just how naive I was about the quality of the competition I was up against and what it means to compete as a black belt. And on one hand, I have a lot more context than I did previously. So that could make someone more anxious, but for whatever reason, it's making me less anxious. I think just because I know what to expect both psychologically and physically. And I just feel super confident in my body right now. I don't know how confident I feel in my jiu-jitsu, but I know it's better than it was last year. And like I've said on previous episodes, I'm looking at this world champion thing, this bid to become a world champion, as a long-term proposition. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but if I can outage everybody and keep learning my jiu-jitsu, make it better than everybody else, eventually there are going to be so few competitors still in the game that will come out on top. So that's my plan. I'm sticking to it. And in terms of the qualitative difference between Worlds and, say, something like the New York Open, Worlds it's just a different atmosphere because it is a competitor for the master, or it is a competition for the Masters division. So we're talking about people, by and large, who are later in their jiu-jitsu career. It's not as make or break, and it's definitely more celebratory. That's the atmosphere of the event in general. It's celebratory of the sport. Saw bits of that, felt bits of that at CJI over the weekend. But I imagine, when you have a room full of fighters fighting to win $1 million, that celebratory energy only goes so far as the edge of the mat. But at Worlds, you can really feel it on the mats too. So that certainly helps take a lot of the psychological edge off of it. So that's kind of where I'm at, my training camp. Looking forward to going to Vegas. I will have one last episode before I hit the road next week because I record on Tuesdays. And maybe I'll record something in Vegas. We'll see if the spirit moves me, if I'm not totally hungover. My wife and I are going together, which I'm really looking forward to, and her parents are coming up to watch our son while we're out of town, so it's going to be a rare couple trip for the two of us, some quality time together. But in terms of what I'm thinking about thematically this week, since that's maybe what you guys come here for, I really don't know what you come here for. You don't talk to me very much. My inbox is very barren, so I really don't know what you get out of this. But thank you for listening. Anyway, this theme that I've been thinking about this week is the theme of seasons. Today here in New Jersey, it feels like a fall day, or at least it did in the morning. When I brought Cormac to school, it was 59 degrees and there was a crispness in the air, and the acorns are starting to fall in earnest. It looks like it's going to be a good acorn year, which bodes well for deer season, which is just around the corner. And you could feel the transition that's about to happen. And simultaneously, I'm going through this transition where I'm easing out of this hardcore competitive mindset and into more like a nurturing mindset as I break from my competition zone and go into more just like the student and teacher zone. And that got me thinking about the challenge inherent in jiu-jitsu competition and in fight sports in general, in the sense that there's no off season. Every sport I've done, whether it was football, baseball, whether it was track and field, cross country, there was always an off season. You know, even with the running sports, you had the summer to kind of do your own thing. And in jiu-jitsu, it never stops. You could compete every single month if you wanted to. So the solution that I've sort of arrived at for myself, both for psychological longevity and physical longevity, is to create seasons. And I generally tend to compete from, we'll say, like April up until the last week of August with Worlds. And I'll try and get 3 or 4 competitions in there. This was the rhythm I fell into last year when I made my return to competition. It felt good. Feels really good for me this year. And there's a nice break built in there too, because I transition from this pure competitive season into hunting season. So it puts me out in the woods, which is sort of more of a restorative place for me mentally and physically. So, I'm looking forward to that transition. But one of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of strategizing about the second half of this transition is improving my abilities as a coach, because frankly, this is an area where I still feel like I have a ton to learn. Feel really underdeveloped. And I also feel deeply conflicted about it, because energetically, it's a very different mind state that I rely on to sharpen myself as a competitor than it is to sharpen myself as a coach. Like, for example, I think when I transitioned into more of the coaching role, it was right around when Cormac was born. So 3 years ago, he just turned 3 a couple weeks ago. And that's when I got my feet wet. And I think that psychologically and mentally, I was in a much better space to embody this nurturing energy that comes from good coaches. One of my coaches, he's sort of like a psychological performance coach by the name of David Zeitler. He said, I once made a comment to him about how coaching is, striking the balance between challenge and support. And he pushed back on that. And he said, really, 98% support might as well be 0% support. And I think he's right. And I think when I was in that place as a new father, I was in the perfect place to be that 100% supportive coach. And it's really hard to embody that, to bring that energy to the mats when you're just trying to like make yourself as good as possible and tear everybody's fucking head off. So I'm really looking forward to that work. I'm really looking ahead to the time between September and April where I want to double down on becoming a better coach. And I want to double down on building up the school, both from a business perspective and a cultural perspective. Like, I've had these ideas circulating about things that I want to do. I would love to institute some sort of a book club in the school where we're looking at books that are sort of seminal to the ethos of what we value as an organization, and kind of have that be like an opt-in thing that students can do. I'm in the process of working on a workshop that Emily asked me to put together on performance psychology, like a lot of the things that I talk about on this podcast, and how people can pull those levers when need be, and not necessarily just in jiu-jitsu competition. I was reflecting a bit on this morning. It transcends jiu-jitsu. Like, maybe you have to give a big presentation at work. Maybe you have to have a hard conversation with a friend. All these tactics that I talk about on this podcast are the same. So I'm looking forward to kind of packaging that and letting you guys hopefully steal some of that fire. But all of this is constructive energy that we're talking about, right? And I feel like right now I'm just embodying destructive energy. Hopefully not self-destructive energy, but destructive energy for my opponents. So yeah, I'm really thinking hard about how being a good coach or a great coach requires that nurturing and energy, and how it's somewhat contradictory to this competitive attitude, this competitive headspace that I'm in right now. And like some of that, frankly, is just time crunch. I only have so many hours in the day, and I'm dedicating a lot of my free time right now to building myself up as a competitor. And I'm dedicating a lot of my free time to right now learning about human physiology and human performance. So there isn't a whole lot of time for everything else. Everything else is kind of like just maintaining the status quo or pushing a little bit here and there. So there's that time crunch, but there's also this energetic crunch that I'm talking about. And that might seem kind of hippie woo woo, but I think that any of you who are competitors will relate to this. And yeah, it's just really hard to be that nurturing figure when you're channeling the warrior. As ridiculous as that sounds, but that's what we're doing, folks. That's an archetype that's out there in everybody's psyche. And when we are honing ourselves as competitors, that's exactly what we're doing. Except, life doesn't stop for that. Not everything else gets put down so we can go pretend to be warriors. So we got to find that balance. And as I transition into this next season, I'm thinking more globally about the liminality of human experience in terms of how we move through seasons, and how we're a little bit in, a little bit out, a little bit in, a little bit out, and then we're all the way in, and then it maybe recedes. It's like the way this idea of liminality was described to me once was, imagine you're looking at the edge where the ocean meets the sand, and you're watching the waves wash in and out, and that line is constantly changing, right? There is no hard line. There is no definitive breaking point. It's this gradual transition as the tide is receding or as the tide is coming in. So I guess I'm just learning to accept that seasonality and that liminality of life. I'm not trying to force things so much. And, I hope that translates a bit to my jiu-jitsu. I could certainly use some of that energy at Worlds. But yeah, just I'm accepting the seasonality of life, maybe even creating it for myself in the sense that I'm creating this competitive season. Maybe that's something you guys too are going to do too, or do too already. But this feels like a really important lesson to me. It's to just accept the natural rhythm of the universe, the boom and bust cycle, and how it's not black or white. It's that wavering liminal line. It's constantly shifting. You can't pin it down. Yeah. Hopefully I'll learn that before I die, because I think it's a source of suffering in my life. Maybe it's a source of suffering in yours too. But seeing that a bit more clearly, as I discussed on a previous episode, it's coming directly from this experience of pushing myself as a competitor. And that's the utility, right? It might be nice to win that medal, but that, as my dear friend Jeff said, when they put that medal around your neck, it feels pretty empty. It feels pretty hollow. But what sticks with you is that transformative experience. That's why I do it. Maybe that's why you do it too. Anyway, lessons. Hopefully I'll learn them before I die. That's all I got for you this week, folks. It was great talking to you. Please always feel free to email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. In addition to the things I described at the school that I'm kind of pondering and pontificating on, I've got some things in the works for the podcast coming up in the off season here. I'll be having some merchandise come out. If you want to buy some shirts, that's a great way to support the podcast. Be rolling those out in the coming months. I'm also going to be doing a limited series. It'll be like a micro season or something like that, where I want to focus on coaching as part of this growth path for me. I want to sit down with a number of really influential coaches in my life and talk to them about their perspective and how they saw their evolution as a coach and where they're going, to hopefully steal some of their fire. So that'll be coming too, and perhaps some more surprises for you as well. But until then, stay tuned, and we'll talk next week.